Alright, this is Tommy from AAA Exterminating Company on a little bit of a road trip going from Creedmoor to Mebane, so I got a little bit of time to kill. But I wanted to make a video addressing something that's going on really bad right now, and that's moisture in crawl spaces. I've been trying to communicate the best I can with people, but we've been so busy, it's been impossible for me to make any videos or put any information out there because I've been so busy in the crawl spaces checking out this moisture and seeing what's going on. So I'm going to take a couple minutes and explain to everybody what's going on with the moisture and why so many crawl spaces are soaking wet right now. Okay, so if you've had a house for sale, or if you've been the listing agent on a property, I'm sure you've seen here lately you're getting some of your wood destroyed insect reports come back, your home inspections come back with high moisture. Right now we're getting readings, our average reading is about 22 to 24% in the average vented crawl space. And it seems like this has changed. More and more every year this is getting worse and worse. There's a few different reasons why. For anybody who's been in the real estate business for a long time, it seems like this problem has gotten more and more prevalent in the past 5 to 10 years. And I've noticed that myself. I've specialized in wood destroyed insect reports for most of my life. Since I was a kid, I started doing it. I've been doing it since probably the 90s, early 2000s. And we've noticed just more and more every summertime, especially spring and summer, we're getting heavy moisture. A few different things are going on. One, the design of the houses are different than they were, say, back in the 60s and 70s. Back then, most of the time, it was narrow ranches being built, rectangle-shaped houses. A house like that can stand up really well with a vented crawl space because they're made for the air to pass through them. So you can get cross ventilation in construction like that. Whereas today, a lot of the footprints being made are much bigger. The houses cover much more of a ground area. The vents on the outside of the crawl space are not adequate for venting out the warm air. Now, you'll hear a lot of reasons for the moisture. You'll hear, it's water's coming into the vents, water's coming through the walls, condensation's coming from the air ducts. All this stuff happens. But the main culprit is warm, moist air. That's why it's so seasonal. That's why in the wintertime, you're not seeing this this moisture all the time because the heater is on in the crawl space and the air is much drier. In the spring and the summer, the air begins to get much warmer, it begins to get wet, it begins to get humid. And so what goes on is that air gets into the crawl space through the vents and it gets hung up in there because the crawl spaces are shaped different. If you think about the way crawl spaces, their houses are built now, they're no longer rectangles, so you've got these big, giant, elaborate shapes sometimes with these foundations. And they still go by the same rules of we need to have this amount of vents per this amount of feet. Now, that is not going to give you the ventilation that the old ranch house would. Now, that air is just getting into that crawl space. A lot of times, the air conditioning system's in that crawl space, and the damp air is getting hung in there. So, whenever you're getting condensation from the air ducts, it's not really that the air ducts are leaking. Of course, that is happening sometimes. But the problem is the warm, moist air that's hitting those air ducts. So, that's how come more and more we're seeing crawl spaces are needing to be closed. And that's just a fact of life. That's where we're going to more and more. We're having to stop air from getting into the crawl spaces because that's what's causing the problems. So a lot of people have jumped into the crawl space business. You have encapsulations, you've got sealed crawl spaces, you've got closed crawl spaces. Then you've got standard vapor barriers and so on and so forth. There's a big difference in between all these. Okay, an encapsulated crawl space is where usually the insulation is removed from the crawl space and they re-insulate the crawl space by attaching foam board to the foundation wall. That, and then of course plastic, the vapor barrier, everything's sealed properly. Whenever you seal the crawl space or close the crawl space off, you must have a way to introduce air to the crawl space or control the environment. So you need to have the AC system opened up into the crawl space, or you need to have a dehumidifier installed into the crawl space, or you need to have a vent fan blowing air out of the crawl space so that you can pull air from the house via reversing the stack effect. So those are the few different ways you can do it. But they're very different. The prices you see are going to be different. One reason I want to bring that up is because I'm seeing a lot of people being sold encapsulated crawl spaces that are only getting sealed crawl spaces or only getting closed crawl spaces. and so people are getting ripped off because they're not being serviced properly. They're not being given the proper thing. So all this needs to be taken into consideration when shopping for this. Now, when it comes to just controlling the crawl space moisture, encapsulations are never really something that is absolutely needed. An encapsulation is kind of an extra thing that you can do. Most of the time, if it's only a question of getting the moisture down, as long as you're not dealing with water coming through the crawl space, through the walls, and in that case, encapsulation won't solve that anyway, because it's coming through the walls. You need to handle the drainage on the outside. A drain guy needs to be called in for that. Or if you got standing water in the crawl space, and encapsulation is not going to help that either. The sump pump's going to help that. Most smart encapsulation companies are going to put sump pumps anyway. But all this stuff's different. But a closing the crawl space, which is installing a perfect 100% coverage vapor barrier, blocking off all the vents, and installing a proper dehumidifier, that will solve almost all of the problems that an encapsulated crawl space will solve. So you do always have that option. That option is going to be more between, say, $2,000 and $3,000, as opposed to encapsulations, which are going to be $5,000 to $12,000 would be the average cost. So there's options you have. You never have to do an encapsulation. That is absolutely never a requirement for a real estate sale. Now, it's okay for people to sell that to homeowners, and it's a good thing to do. I'm not against encapsulations. I think they're great, and we're actually getting into doing that. But I just want to make the point that those are never needed for controlling the moisture, especially for a real estate transaction. You do have other options, and so you should always explore those. Talk to multiple people and have that done. But I just want to kind of put this information out there just to let everybody know that these moisture issues are not going to be going away anytime soon. This is going to be something permanently we're going to end up dealing with. That's why you're seeing so many of the newer houses built now are already being encapsulated. Some of the crawl spaces don't even have vents anymore, and that's probably the direction we're going to be moving. So there's still a lot of inventory out there that has these old vented crawl spaces, and if they're being sold this time of year, you are probably going to be dealing with high moisture more than likely. We can, if I get moisture that's say 20 or 22%, it's still kind of, it's reasonable to say that this is due to high humidity, recent rains, or seasonal moisture. Sometimes mortgage companies are going to be okay closing on that kind of language. But understand that even though it's seasonal and even though it's related to high humidity in the environment, it's still bad. Crawl spaces should never have moisture 20% or higher. You should never have that. And so these are things that are going to be dealt with more and more. And if you are in a situation, feel free to contact us. Our email is probably the best, aaexterminating@gmail.com. And we'll be glad to help you out if we can, answer any questions, or can give you a consultation about any kind of situation to see if we can help you get through a rough closing. But don't worry, you're not alone. Believe me, I'm doing about 10 to 12 wood destroyed insect reports a day, and every single day, if it's a vented crawl space, I'd say 9 out of 10 of those vented crawl spaces are having moisture above 20% right now. So it's a very common situation, and we're doing the best to kind of help everybody get through it. So don't let it get you too down, and I promise you there's certain things that can be done, make it as painless as possible. But just let us know if you have any questions.